So you must localize power, because anything in life that is essential should be locally available. That's a norm.
Sorry, because I want to piggyback off that. My next question would be security. Would you say we need
localize
state police?
it? Yes, but it's policing, not police. It's the same thing, but I'll explain it.
It's a bit technical when the state government is in charge of.
No, yeah, but you have it also at the national. Look at what's happening in Ekiti. They're harassing man. So you're now saying that only one person should harass everybody. That's what it means. Yeah. Okay, the Constitution says that the governor is the chief security officer, but he has no real authority. Okay, if the governor is friendly with the president and you have a police commissioner who's not performing, then he can do something. In my state, I had a police commissioner who didn't know what time of day it was. So I told the president that I can't stand this guy, and they removed him. But it shouldn't be that way. But it's even beyond that. And just because one man is going to abuse the system doesn't mean you condemn the value chain. Okay, you have to look at it from another point of view. Ordinarily, you need one policeman per 100 people. So with a population of almost 200 million, you need 2 million policemen. Yeah. Right now you have about 350,000. Half of them are following big men back and forth. One big man has like 4, some 6, bankers and all that. You know. So effectively, you don't have more than 100,000 policemen doing police duties in Nigeria. Whereas you should have had 2 million. And there are two sides to it. You can have a commercial wing where they train people to do
private,
and the police will make money off it. For one person that you pay 250,000 naira every month, or 500,000 every month. So you only take because you really need it, not because you want to show you're a big man. And that's an arm that would bring a substantial revenue to them. But beyond that, because you cannot provide the number that is required, you look at your services. There's no state or local government that is not overpopulated. So you don't employ new people. From your rank of your service, you can easily, in Cross River, I could have taken 2,000-3,000 people to do policing work. What is policing work? Gathering intelligence. You live amongst the people. You go for basic police training, 6 months course. Okay, I live in an area, and that's why we must stop all this barracks thing. Police shouldn't live in barracks. Police should live amongst the people, because 80% of policing is intelligence gathering. So you live amongst people, you know the people, you know what they do, without being obvious. But I know that you work with here, everybody, I know what you do, and I know, because you've got to be proactive. So if it requires enforcement, I could liaise with the federal police to enforce. But if I see that these people who live in this house, they're not up to anything good, I'll tell the federal police, then we carry out a surveillance and all that. So it's all interactive, and that's why I said it's more of policing. It's more, but to just say, no, you don't need all this. No, you're making a huge mistake. And you can limit state policing to sidearms, right? Have a Beretta here, just a pistol and all that. Because you need something. They need to just be more than talking. And that's not going to threaten anybody. You still can, it doesn't authorize the state government to import arms. That could be obtained centrally. Okay? But the primary purpose of state policing is intelligence gathering. And they must work in concert with the federal police for enforcement. It's almost inconceivable that you find state governments buying APC and all that. They can't afford it, and all that. So they work together. So we shouldn't jettison it. We should look at the larger picture and see how we can tweak it to make it to work.
Okay. We're talking about your success in agriculture in Cross River. Now, on a larger scale, on a federal level, you also have the problem of we importing, what we have local, farmers for. How it's not possible to be importing in a world.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. So how do we help these farmers to produce more?
Look at your entire credit chain. As long as you see, when banks charge you 30% interest rate, no one is going to go into agriculture with that kind of thing. Problem, So come back. If it's for me, interest rate shouldn't exceed 7%. If I can get money at 7%, right? 5-10 year money, agri starts to make sense. You can do some agriculture on that sort of money. And right now we all have we have different percentages for different functions. That's nonsense. Just make it affordable year-round. So whatever I'm doing, if I'm doing IT and all that, this is, and that will enhance the productivity. But look at this country. Every day we eat bread. I'm sure everybody in this room has eaten bread this morning. That's wheat. So it's imported. It's not local. We import about 4.5 million tons of wheat annually. How long are we going to do that? We're hemorrhaging. So if you can't grow wheat in Nigeria, find a substitute. Japan, they drink a lot of beer, more than we do here, but they don't use barley and hops, they use rice. That's what they have. In this country, we used to make star beer with maize and what's it called? Sorghum. Then we stopped it, and everybody went back to barley and hops. It's a waste. It also encourages ingenuity, being able to convert. There are other substances you can use in making bread, and you will not even know the difference. Yeah. Do you know that North Korea, in the time of Kim Il-sung, the grandfather, were making clothes out of cassava? Here you have an excess.
Yeah,
yes.
So you have to, what is essential, and I said whatever is important, essential has to be local. You can't import food to eat. It's inconceivable. It's not, because it's not sustainable. Our population is 200 million. In 30 years it'll be 400 million. Are we still going to be importing food for this? Where's the money coming from? Where are the jobs? And by providing locally, you're creating opportunity, you're creating jobs. Look at Benue. All the juices we drink in this country, they're imported concentrate. But if you look at the middle belt, even as farther north, as far as Kebbi and all that, that is a citrus belt. Mangoes. If you go to, I don't know how well you know Kebbi State, you just see mangoes as far as the eyes can see. Nobody's using it for anything. So there are opportunities there, and that's why, when I said states have to find what they can do. A state like Kebbi can just say, okay, all we're going to do is mangoes. And they will really pick and they'll get concentrate plants and they'll export mango concentrates around the world. That could be the major industry in that place. So you just got to think, you've got to get the states active. It can be done.
I want to talk about, we talked about like the interest rate from the banks. How easy or hard is it changing these policies?
It's regulation. It used to be regulated before.
Yeah.
Then a time came where we deregulated everything, and the banks went haywire. And when the banking system was regulated, the country was better off. We were having industries. At that time, we dominated all of West and Central Africa markets. All these factories were springing up. That's when Agbara Estate, all those things were springing up because there was affordable credit. Then we had SAP. Then we deregulated everything, and they started closing. At that time, you had Adebawale Industries. I don't know if you remember. We had Adebawale, and he was making electronics, actually manufacturing electronic parts and components and all that. You had Frigidaire. They were making fridges and all that. You had there was this fridge called this South. Everything was manufacturing. Then we deregulated. It became industry. The interest rate could not support industry. So it was cheaper to import. So Adebawale Industries became Adebawale Superstores. It was now trading. Folks lost their jobs.
Important.
At that time, manufacturing was about 18% of our GDP. Today it's almost about only 5%. And that 5%, in the next 3 years, Dangote will be half of it. In the next 3 years, Dangote will be half of your manufacturing.
So the solution to importation, one, regulate interest rates.
You have to regulate interest rates. You can't allow people using other people's money charge unbridled when you want to grow your own economy. I'm not saying that you shouldn't make profit, but you can't make that. That's why the bankers live a lifestyle that is larger than life, larger than reality. So you see a bank MD with a convoy, you think he's a head of state or something moving around, you all see, they drive us from the road every day. I tell, okay, I used to be like that before, okay. Yeah. You go to the airport, they go to the private side, they enter their private jet, they offer me leave from time to time, that, Governor, can I, but the system, a country that is doing so poorly, now banks are declaring their profits in dollars. Some of them tell they made profit of $1.2 billion. How?
It's also a trend in banks to not, hire full-time employees. I don't know if you know that. 60 to 70%.
They just get marketers.
And they're all on contract staff. They're all contract
Yeah,
staff.
so that they can dismiss you anyhow.
Yeah, so they don't pay, pension or they pay like very meager.
Because they're not regulated. They should be regulated. You can't. You're dealing with money.
But why do these problems exist
You're
right
dealing
now?
with other people's money. You must be regulated, because you have a fiduciary responsibility. How can you take people's money and not be regulated? Why is it? There's a lot of compromise in the system. These same people are the ones that fund the elections. They're in bed with them. The governor of the central bank is a former governor, a former banker. It's all intertwined. It is a racket.
How do you break these traditional forces?
You're president. You're president. I said, your will. This is what I want. The president has enormous powers if he knows what to do with it. But you have, and the job of a governor of central bank, with due respect to Godwin, and I think he's tried to evolve from being a banker to being an economic manager. But it's primarily the work of an economist, not the work of a banker, right? Because he has to look at the larger picture, how the banking and monetary system affects the entire economy, okay? So he would know, for instance, that these high interest rates are killing. And they know this because they have a window where they give funds at about 7% for industry. So you know high interest rate is affecting the economy. Why are you allowing the banks to charge so much? And that would inspire the banks to work harder, to give out loans to many people and monitor the loans. And, a young lady comes up to me. She wants to set up a chin-chin factory, right? But she wants me to gather a few of my friends to give her the money. I said, no, go to the bank. I won't be able to pay back the interest rate. But that business should have employed at least 10 people and added value to their lives. It's wrong. You need to do it. If you can't grow the economy without that. And this nation has to grow at 15%, like I said, annually for 10 years consecutively to recalibrate the system. And if you don't do it, you'll keep on having the Boko Harams, the herdsmen crisis and all that, because it's all economic, purely economic.
Let's talk about the population pop. Well, I think if I do remember, Spectator Index tweeted that we're the fastest growing, country.
That's why in 30 years we'll be 400 million. Our population will double in 30 years and will be the third most populous nation in the world after India and China. India would have overtaken China and will be the number 3. More than Indonesia, more than United States, more than Russia.
And currently we are the poorest country.
Poverty capital of the world.
That's the danger we're in.
So
that's why you can't take 19, right?
Can't play with it.
We must take it very seriously. It's a watershed here.
How do we solve this population growth? Is there even a solution to this to reduce it? We saw what China did.
Culturally, it's difficult to legislate and say you can't have more than. So you've got to work from a variety of sources. You've got to get the traditional rulers involved, encouraging the people that, look, I know our religion allows you to marry 4 wives.
Or family planning.
Cool
bro.
So that is one way. You've got to get the people productive. Statistically, people who are busy don't breed as many. It's the people that don't have. There's a chap I know in Maiduguri, and he called me from time to time and he's looking for support. So I said, look, he said, I have 13 children. I said,
13 children.
I said, Baba,
That's a football team now.
I said, Baba, what are you doing with 13 children? I said, Allah gave it to me. I said, okay, I don't want to sound hypocritical about that. Pray to Allah to give you the means to look after them. You've got to educate them and all that. But beyond that, you've got to get people busy and working. Right? There was a survey that was carried out either in Ivory Coast or Senegal. And they realized that when electricity was put in a community and people had jobs and all that, birth rate dropped.
I wonder if when you were the National Economic Intelligence Committee under Abacha, if you guys had really any effect on decisions made economically in the country? A few.
They had a few successes, but some failures too. For instance, it was during that time that we really let our refineries go under, and we just went into unbridled importation of petroleum products. But we were fighting that refineries should be maintained. We even proposed that don't privatize them, but privatize the management. So for instance, we interviewed Total, Shell, And I think it was ELF at the time, but they're now called, I think the ELF, in terms of Europe, we will refurbish the refineries and give it to them to manage. Of course, there was a lot of backlash because the NNPC boys wanted to manage the refineries themselves.
Yeah.
We said, look, if you manage it, this is the result. You know that, I think Abacha just said, look, let's just import this thing.
Straight up, like
Because him and the family were making a lot of money from that.
Well, was there any reason why during his tenure, he never increased the price of fuel?
The subsidy, that's when the real subsidy started. And look, the subsidy is a racket. There's no way right now they pay over ₦1 trillion as subsidy. It's not true. That thing can be more than 400 or 500 billion, but they pay over ₦1 trillion. But you can't subsidize what you're importing. And like I said, you can fix those refineries, get the manufacturers to refurbish them as new, but the critical thing is who is going to manage them. If you give it to the same people, they'll run it down. Okay? So it's just a method of doing the business. But right now, NNPC really has no business managing those things. They should really privatize all of them.
Under Abdul Salam, what was like any key role you guys played in the transition?
we worked with...
Can we start with, where were you when you heard that Abacha was dead?
I was in a friend's house at Norman Williams, and we were talking, and his name is Imam. He's from Kano, and he was very close to Abacha. And we were discussing, and a phone call came in, and he was on the phone, and I heard him shout, Allahu Akbar, and I said, what's wrong? He was shaken. He said, head of state die. He don't yamutu. I said, really? Which head of state? He said, Abacha. I said, how? It was about 11 a.m. in that morning. He had died in the early hours.
Really.
So
we heard in the evening.
We heard in the evening like
Through a party.
It was about 11 a.m. when I heard.
So the role you guys played under Abdul Salam?
It was different.
Okay.
Let me tell you a story. Adisa, General Adisa, was Minister of Works. And he sent a memo to Abacha. He wanted to import bitumen for road construction. Like I said, every memo that went to Abacha came to us for our opinion because he trusted Professor Aluko and the team. He didn't trust, Abacha didn't trust anybody. And you believe it or not, he abhorred corruption.
Wow.
Honestly. Wow. I mean, if you tell Abacha that this man is a thief and you can prove it, he will destroy you. So he sent this memo to us. All the memos automatically come. We write our opinion. So this memo comes, and Aluko looks at me and says, Donald, two of you go to Kaduna. Kaduna produces bitumen. And find out why we can't get bitumen in Kaduna. Why do we have to import? So I go to Kaduna, and I find out that Kaduna is shut down because the bitumen tanks have not been evacuated, because bitumen is a byproduct of Kaduna now. Let me remind you, Kaduna doesn't use Nigerian crude. Kaduna uses Venezuelan crude, heavy crude. And one of the byproducts of heavy crude is bitumen. Even though we have the second largest natural occurring deposits of bitumen in the world after Canada.
God damn.
If you go to parts of Ondo, bitumen is at the surface level. You can poke it and draw it up like this. We should be refining that thing. That's another story. So I go back, I write my report that the quality of bitumen he wanted to import was inferior to what we had in Kaduna. And if you don't evacuate the tanks in Kaduna, the refinery couldn't work. So we wrote a memo. And it was a very strong memo. For about a week or two, no response. Then one day, we were summoned to the villa. And we got into this. He said it was over a bitumen report. I had to go, so I need to be graphic here. There is Abacha sitting in the middle, head of state. To his right was Dick Udia, who was chief of general staff. To his left was Abdul Salam, who was chief of defense staff. To Salam's left was General Buhari then, who was chairman PTF, because he's a bitumen user. To his left was Danny Tete, who was Minister of Petroleum. To Etete's left was Alhaji Bayero, who was GMD and NPC. To the right of Dia was General Adisa.
Packed room.
To the right of Adisa were a series of executives from NNPC, the managing director of the Kaduna Refinery and all those guys. Then across the room there were we guys from the National Economic Committee. So in the course of the meeting, Adisa was throwing tantrums that if he's not allowed to import bitumen, he won't do anything. Buhari didn't say a word throughout that meeting. And at a stage, Abacha, you could see that there was a deal going on because Adisa would throw tantrums like, oh, guy, this would a grandmother in the talk. If they not allow me import this, I don't do any work. And Abacha said, Adisa, cool down. You know, so you could see that there was an understanding. And you could, maybe there was, because there was a huge amount of bitumen they wanted to import. So at the stage, he takes a sheet of paper and he looks at it and says, Dan, that's Etete. You said the price of bitumen is XYZ, but what I'm saying here is different. Or am I wrong? Abdul Salam looks at him and says, how can you be wrong? You can't be wrong, sir. Even if you're wrong, you're right. Then he looks at
Somebody wants to be found corrupt.
He looks at Dia and says, Dikbo. That's all he said. Dikbo. He said, you're right, sir. So he now looks at Etete. So Dan, what are you telling me? Literally, Etete goes on his knees and says, I'm sorry, sir.
One time.
You can't be found corrupt.
Now, when Abdul Salam becomes head of state, the first meeting we had, because he needed a briefing, and we were the only organization that could give him a comprehensive briefing
of what was happening
of the country. The first question Aluko asked him, said, General, even if you're wrong, you're right, Abi. He said, no, sir.
You're not doing
It's
that.
a different dispensation. So you asked me that question. Abdul Salam was very different. He was very liberal, very broad, very open-minded. He, in terms of, he was in a hurry to go. He was in a hurry to go. He was in a hurry to hand over and all that. But working with him was very delightful, even though it was a very short period, because I also left to go contest and all that. But he was very liberal. He would listen to you. Abacha wear these sunglasses. You can't see his eye.
You don't even know what he's doing.
And he was very impatient. I remember once at a council meeting, he turned to Gambo, who was Minister of Agriculture, and said, Agric, how much money what's the cost of fertilizer subsidy? Gambo didn't know. So next to him was Antoniani, who was Minister of Finance. So Antoniani looked at him and Antoniani was just being mischievous. He said, 20 billion. Just called a figure. So Gambo said, 20 billion. So Abacha said, And he said, 8 billion. He said, 8 billion. So Abacha said, what are you calling? And he said, 15 billion. He was just being mischievous. He was just playing with the guy. But there was trepidation in dealing with Abacha. He hardly had council meetings. Whoa. He can go 3 months, he won't have any council meeting.
No time.
And there was always this threat of reorganizing the cabinet. So ministers will wait till there's a story he's going to reorganize. So when he says that the council meeting, they think is the final one. So this time the rumor was really rife that he was going to change his cabinet. Yeah. So we got in, and they'll come to our office to ask Professor Luka, have you heard anything like that? But we say nothing like that. Yeah, everybody's saying the man is going to. The ministers were like kids. Yeah. So we get into council, and this particular day, the Minister of National Planning at that time, Ayo Ogunlade, in council, you put on your mic and you speak. Yeah. He now put up his hand and he got up to speak. Abacha said, sit down. He said, no, sir. I want to stand up and speak. First of all, you don't say no to Abacha. Because it was good. Yeah. So the guy insisted on standing up. So Abacha said, okay, stand. Then the man now turned around and said, Secretariat, I want you to record everything I'm saying here. They do that normally. Why are you emphasizing? This man went on to praise Abacha to high heaven. He said, Nigerians don't know what they have. He said, God sent you at this time to save our country. He went on. It was so bad. Abacha told him, sit down. He said, no, sir, I won't sit down. He said, sit down, you sycophant. He said, no, sir, I won't sit down. So Abacha said, okay, talk. He went on and praised Abacha to high heavens. When he was there, he sat down. Abacha said, are you tired now? I said, no. So the meeting went on. After the meeting, Professor Lugo called him and said, Aburo, what was all that about? He said, Oga, I hear they want to change cabinet.
Let me shoot my shot.
But you know the interesting thing is, 2 weeks later they changed cabinet and the man survived. So you see, but when he wanted something done, it was done. But again, he wasn't prepared for leadership. Like, that's a bane. Like most of our leaders are not prepared. They just thrust on them. So, and he was very myopic, and the ministers didn't have access to him.
And you can't lead like that.
You stayed so long outside, since you left your post as governor. How did you kind of cope, and why did you go off radar for a long time?
Well, I was doing something before I became governor, and people ask, so why are you off the radar? I was doing something else. People expect you to keep on making noise so that people recognize you.
Or at least go the normal route from governor to
minister and all that.
Minister,
No, I'm not a legislative material. It would be very frustrating for me to stand up, make a few points, sit down again, without being impactful. Let me use that time and do something else. Secondly, I was offered ministerial by several governments after, but who you work for matters. If you care about your reputation. And I must be ideologically aligned with the president to work with him, because I'm quite fastidious in what I believe in. And if I'm not going to function with you, let me go do something else, which is what I opted to do. And by the time I got the second offer, I was deep in a project which I'm handling now, and I felt that it would be unfair to the investors of that project to walk away and go do something different. So, being a minister can be a frustrating thing if you're not aligned with the president, because he has the authority.
You don't have executive power.
You don't.
Yeah.
How do you plan to cope with the legislation?
It's politics. You've got to learn to work with them. You have to interface. They all have interests. They didn't come to Abuja to look at you or serve you. They all come from their constituencies. So the first thing is, let's take the budget. I'm going to ask the Legislative House, you submit your own budget. Submit the projects that you think are important to your own constituency, because they have an interest. It's governance. It's not, the executive executes, but we're all part of government. So I may come from one local government that is far off, nobody knows about it, okay? I want you to tell me, in submitting your budget proposals, tell me the things that are important to you. I'll compile that. Even the governors, tell me projects that you think the federal government can do in your state. It may be a road, it may be a federal road, right, that are important. It's a compilation of all these things against the money that I have available that will determine, okay? So if the judiciary, the same thing. If we all, so when I submit a budget to you, it's really a compilation of everything that we did. So it will largely pass, because the first thing is, when it gets to the member, he wants to see if they capture my project.
Yeah, true.
You know? And if you find that if you capture part of it, or you explain that, look, I can't capture in this year's budget, but I'll capture it next year's budget, then you have a working relationship with them. So you don't just send whatever you like, then they just beef it up and all that. You'll probably get what you put in. And you must send in the budget at least 90 days before the end of the fiscal year. You can't send the budget in December. I mean, I think the budget was just signed a few weeks ago in the rainy season. So construction is off.
So the end
so
of
you
the
need to
year,
give them like 90 days and look, in Cross River, on or before the 30th of September every year, I give you the budget with the understanding that on or before the 31st of December, you give me back the budget. And it works seamlessly. And once you have that understanding with them, because they need you, you need them. You can't keep on barking down with them, and this is when you have military heads of state there, because they're not used to this. This is, by the time you get to be a general, at that time, not even the general of today, I mean, you're so authoritative in your... So Obasanjo had the same problem too. Okay?
What I say.
You sit down, ask them, they give you their inputs. They must give you their inputs on or before June, right? Or even March. Then you compile them, you look at how you're going to do it. Where you cannot accommodate the inputs, you explain, okay? If a majority of the inputs are contained, the man who doesn't get it, he can't frustrate it because his colleagues have an interest. It's all about self-interest.
Yeah.
Nobody's there to serve anybody. Then you work with them alongside those things. It's not difficult, but you need to give and take.
Okay.
It doesn't sound difficult, does it?
No, it doesn't sound
Because, when you just submit a document to them, they sit down, they tear your document into pieces, they hike this, they reduce this, they do this, they do that. By the time you get the document back, it's of no use to you. So why not make them part of the process?
It's a simple solution, not easy, but simple.
The best solutions are the simple ones. When you start designing something that is rocket, a rocket is a very simple thing. It compresses air and pushes it, thrust. It's propulsion. But when you look at it, it looks complex, but the thinking behind it is very simple.
Okay, one thing that frustrates me about the Nigerian society that we live in is, as salary earners, we earn monthly. But you now want to go and rent a house, and your landlord tells you, pay 1 year in advance, pay 2 years in advance, which is frustrating. How can you solve that problem?
Comes back to the banking system. Because the landlord built that house. He got a loan from the bank. The bank wants him to pay at 30% in 2 or 3 years. So he's going to fleece you. Okay? But if it was affordable, then he can spread his own payments. If you get a mortgage in a Western country, say the United States or Europe, it's 30 years. 30 years money. In 30 years, come on. At 3-4%, you build your house and all that. So it comes back. The financial system is very, very critical, but we underestimate it. That is one. Two, we have a 20 million housing shortage in Nigeria. 20 million. That's a lot, but it's also a great opportunity because you can create a lot of jobs on the back of that. The Navy in Calabar built a barrack using laterite. And it's beautiful, neat, clean, very decent. With that system of governance, and in Calabar it rains all the year round. And they built 100 units in under 6 months. And they said they were only, because they were not that efficient. I postulate that if you're very serious, you can do even over 1 million units, open new towns with this system of construction. And on the back of housing, you can develop industry. You see, housing, constructing this, there's masonry, there's plumbing, there's carpentry, there's electrical, all these coming. So the skills being enhanced. If you were able to do 1 million houses, which from the example of the Navy, you can easily do nationwide, you'd engage at least 15 million people working. Okay? And that, you could have a program whereby in 10, 15 years, you've bridged the housing gap. And that would reduce pressure. But if you change the financial system, the banks would not have cause to demand that much. I'm a landlord. I borrowed money to build a house. I know the pressure the banks put me under. And in fact, in my own case, I was asking for 5 years. Otherwise, I would have been in trouble. And I was lucky. Most people ask for 3 years. I found a tenant that was ready to pay that much because it was a good property. They wanted to keep it. But it's tough. It's really tough. If you want people to invest in that sector, you must also look at the offtake. In other parts of the world, you pay monthly. You don't even annually. It's a lot. You pay monthly, but you have some guarantee and all that.
Let's talk about security. Boko Haram. You mentioned, when you mentioned Boko Haram, you attributed some of those problems to, of course, the economy, people not having jobs, and the economy. But it grows more than that.
It's a bit more than
it
that,
is
yes. We've allowed it go more than that.
Yeah,
it started that way, but it escalated more than that.
But even primarily, right, the whole notion of Boko Haram, which is, the war against, Western
education.
That's a mask. It's not true. It's a mask. You've got to give a dog a bad name to kill it. They didn't get up and say, well, all of a sudden we're against Western education. No. Because there was the environment was ripe for detention. I'll explain this to you. The immediate cause of Boko Haram was political. The governor then, Ali Modu Sharif,
Yeah.
and at that time there was this word of Sharia,
Sharia all over the
Yeah.
place, yeah.
A number of states had done it. Now, if you understand it, and that's the sad thing, we don't study history.
Yeah.
The Kanem Bornu Islam is different from the Sokoto Islam.
Islam.
And if you look at the structure of Islam in Nigeria, the Sultan, right, is number one. But almost parallel is the El Kanemi.
Yeah.
He was never conquered by Sokoto.
True.
It was a willful adoption. It's not like all the other emirates of Kano, all the others who got their flag from Uthman Dan Fodio, right? He gives you, you fly the flag, you take over the place and
Yeah.
all that. So you have all of them are of Fulani stock, right? Whether it's Kano, Katsina, even as far as Ilorin, the Gambaris are Fulani stock. But in Borno, it's pure Kanuri. Okay? Now, there's this spread of Sharia, which again was political. Okay? And it was catching on. And the governor wanted on the back of that for elections, because there were people who were going to use it against him.
Yeah.
So he had a deal with this guy, I forget his name now, but the guy who was killed. After the elections, what's his name? Yusuf, yes. After the elections, he reneged. Yusuf is one of these ideologues.
Yeah.
So he pulls out and is, like an anti-government sentiment. And he's extrajudicially executed. But he had a followership, and the followership were threatened. And the army and the police were in mayhem. They were slaughtering them. It's in YouTube, you've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
Okay? If at that point, that is the immediate cause. Before I go into the remote cause, if at that point there was inquiry and all those who were involved in that were brought to book, you would have stemmed Boko Haram. It wouldn't have happened. But nothing was happening. So the guys they felt threatened, they ran into the bush and took up arms, right? Now, what's the remote cause that I said created the environment? Poverty. Don't forget that in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that part of the country was a cotton belt.
Yeah.
Nigeria was on the cotton map of the world. We were one of the largest cotton producers in the world. And we had textile mills everywhere. When the textile mills collapsed, cotton growing died. So talking about agriculture, you've got to tie agric to industry. Otherwise, it will remain always at the subsistence level. If you want to agric to grow, you've got to tie it
to something else.
into processing.
Yeah.
And processing is not working today because bank rates and affordability of funding.
Nobody can purchase the machinery.
So it also fell at a time when we started getting these cheap imports from Southeast Asia, from the Far East and Asia, China, India, and all that.
Easy to flip and sell. Yeah.
So it was the textile mills were not sustainable because cheap imports were wiping out everything. So one after the other, they started shutting down. And as long as the demand was no longer there, cotton farming ebbed. Nigeria was one of the largest cotton growing nations in the world in the 60s. So that wiped out. So they were poor. Okay? So in the face of poverty, these things, that's why I said that's the remote cause. But the immediate cause was a political issue that was not dealt with. So how do you reverse it? You still may have to go back to that political thing to deal with it. That's one. Two, you've got to find a way of engaging. But also, it's a failure of intelligence. We've been fighting Boko Haram for 7-8 years now, longer than the Nigerian Civil War, more expensive than the Nigerian Civil War, more death than the Nigerian Civil War. Yet we don't have intelligence on what's going on. How come? By now we should have infiltrated that place. So it's a carrot and stick. While you're dealing with them militarily, right, you're trying to embed them because we created the environment for that thing to thrive. Then you've got to also, when you bring it under control, you must massively invest in that area. One of the things, like I said, housing, for instance, that doesn't require too much skills to build, right? And start building using this form of construction. because a lot of folks are homeless. Now, the danger, we have the IDP camps there. I don't know if you have visited any of those camps. We're creating the next generation of Boko Haram in those camps. The living conditions of the folks in those camps is abhorrible. The abuse going on in those camps is unimaginable. You see a woman with 4 or 5 children, she doesn't know who the parents are. The people who are managing the camps are raping the women. The soldiers who are looking after the camp are raping the women. The women agree because they need money to feed the children they're on. Look, they have at the back. A lady told me, she used to be a permanent secretary. She said she's from that area. She went to one of the camps. And there's this lady, she said what struck her was the beauty of the woman and the innate pride in her. She was not very literate, but she had the way she carried herself. And she had a kid at her back. And she slept with one of the soldiers there. They called her and said, "Why are you doing this?" And she looked at the woman, looked at her for a while and said, "How do I feed this? Is it because of this body? Let them take it. I need to feed this." Aliko told me a story. He goes to a camp and he sees one of these boys. Boy was about 5 years old. And he looks at him and says, "Inababa." Inababa means, "Where's your father?" The guy looks at him in a very strange way. What is Baba? He doesn't understand the concept of fatherhood. So you're bringing up loveless children into the world, right? The danger is that when they now get to the prime of their lives and unleash the anger on society, don't expect mercy. And we're not doing anything about it. Okay, and there are many camps. There are the camps that they use when they bring the Bill Gates of the world. They go and show them the camp.
The PR camps.
Right, those are PR camps. The real camps, you don't want to go there. So we're not dealing with these issues. And you can't keep people in a camp for... Camps are meant to be transitional. By now,
that's too long.
You should engage
integrate them back into
society. You can't keep them in camps for too long. When I was governor, we stopped orphanages in Cross River.
Why?
Because you can't bring up a child in an orphanage. A child needs love. So we made them transit camps. We got people to adopt them. There's a certain criteria you go through, right? And if you meet the criteria, you can take a child there. So we emptied, in about a year to 18 months, we emptied up their orphanages. And we found that it's usually the women or families where maybe their children have grown up and they've gone, or they don't have, and they take up these children. And the children, the way he was dealt with was a bit too high-handed. The moment you arrest him for sedition or whatever you want, the courts give him bail, grant him bail, and monitor him, that's all. It took a while for them to release him. You know, he went to court several times, it took a while. And so you're flouting court orders. Then when you eventually release him, by that time you've made a hero out of this guy. He goes to his house, in his father's compound. He forms a small army, unarmed army. I saw a video of him inspecting some people without, and all that. I mean, at that point, I think it was a joke. But he had the sympathy of the people because they didn't feel part of the administration. And you now send tanks and all this against him. And the question people ask, is it because it's from this part? So, look, herdsmen whom you claim are non-Nigerians come in and kill people. And you don't send army after them. In fact, they start making excuses for them. It's because of the grazing law, it's because of this, it's because of that. But you agree that these are foreigners, even if there's a grazing law. But you said they are foreigners, they're not Nigerians. They come into your country and they're killing your people. And this is how you deal with them. Then a Nigerian is rabble-rousing. Democracy is freedom of speech. You can say whatever you like. If you feel so bad, take him to court and all that. If you felt that he was abusing his terms of bail, you go back to court and they can rearrest him and all that. But you send the Nigerian army, say, Operation Python Dance or something like that, or Crocodile Smile or something.
Python Dance 2.
There's 1 and 2. I think that created
a bit of a problem.
It was a problem. It was poorly handled.
Okay. More than 17 million Nigerians, in diaspora. We see them news every day of Nigerians being killed in South Africa. 27 girls died in the Mediterranean Sea, and we're buried in Italy without any Nigerian official there. Do we have enough problems? Is it just we have enough problems here? We don't care about them?
Frankly, we're not a very caring society. We have an embassy in Italy. Questions should have been asked, and I said talked about consequences, right? Because you have a huge number of Nigerians in prisons around the world.
Yeah.
How does the embassy engage in all this? You know very well that if you arrest an American, even a Nigerian American, once he carries an American passport, right, the embassy will ask questions. The embassy immediately will ask questions. That's because they feel responsible. People take their job seriously. Here we don't. We don't even have a migration policy. So people just stroll out of the country. Again, it's because there's discontent. The economy, there are too many people outside the economy, so they're trying to survive. Even the people who are educated. The number of Nigerian professionals that are trying to emigrate, right, is a huge number.
It's legal and illegal.
Yeah.
It's
so
on both fronts. Yeah.
But people have to survive. And if you cannot cater for them, they'll find their way and be... Look, I have engaged some of them. I know a chap who went through the Sahara Desert. He found his way as far as Italy. Took him 3 years, Odyssey. They're probably trying to make a film of it, okay? The stories are agonizing. You sleep at night, you wake up, the man next to you is dead, right? You learn to drink the urine of others because you can't even produce urine any longer. You're so dehydrated. So where they're able to urinate, they keep it. Because when they're thirsty, they drink it. People go around stealing other people's urine just to survive. It's that bad. So it's not then you go into a rickety boat. That boat could capsize. Anything could happen. So at least half of them are lost. They go through slavery, they go through this. The women are abused. It's not just men. The women are abused. They sell themselves and all that. And we just turn a blind eye to it as if it's not happening. We're not policing. We're not even engaging the countries through which they're going through. We should be able to engage Niger. We should be able to engage Chad. Engage Libya and all that. We're not doing all those things. So, well, folk, I've said this, and look, even the people in Nigeria, we're looking after them. Those ones that have gone, they're no longer in our border and all that. You know, so our government has to be more responsive, and that means changing the way we are governed. Each and every one of us matters. We all matter. I have a series called Bridging the Gap, and I talk about a number of these issues, you know, and I think you should plug into it.
Where can we get on YouTube?
Yeah, donaldduke.ng, and there's a program there, Bridging the Gap.
How did you manage to stay like in tune with what's happening? Because people go into offices and just become tone deaf. They don't know what's happening. People don't tell them. How do you manage to, to relate with people?
To get the pulse of
what people are feeling?
I didn't go into politics for self-actualization. I went in because I believe we're better than this, and we could do better. And you think through problems. A number of times we throw money at problems. It doesn't solve it. It may abate it, but it won't solve it. You've got to think through, why are things like this? Why can't we do this and that? And you try and reason it out and all that. I may not have all the answers, but I'm sure if we put our heads together, we can find the answers. And so my passion for politics was not self-actualization. And I mean this with all earnestness. I just felt that we could, if we don't do something urgently to correct our society, it will come back to haunt us. And it's already happening.
What do you think about President Trump and his comments on some African countries?
Trump is a very interesting person. Beyond the name that we share, we both belong to the same alma mater. We both went to University of Pennsylvania. Yes. Yeah. So, but beyond that, and when I was at Penn, Trump was the first set of yuppies. Was Donald Trump. He was a billionaire under 40.
Yeah.
He's always been brash. He gave a commencement lecture. Was it commencement? He gave a lecture once at the Wharton School. And He was very popular then, young, really good-looking chap, really, really good-looking, and suave, you know. He came in to give a lecture. All I remember from that lecture was, I am rich. I'm very, very rich, you know, and all that. But beyond that, talking of his presidency, there's sense in his nonsense. He's not a conventional president.
Yeah,
He does not have the ethos of a president, but take his style and look at the depth. Take the recent controversy. The United States really pays for the security of Europe. The United States has over almost 100,000 troops in Europe. They have about almost 60,000 in Germany alone, 25,000 in Italy, not to talk of England and all the other places. Over 100,000 troops. They're not paid by Europeans. They're paid from American taxpayers' money. They carry equipment. So the equipments are not bought in Europe. They're American equipments transported there. Okay? You may say it's their strategic interest.
Yeah.
But they're protecting also those countries, right? But those countries, America can't trade with them. They put all sorts of barriers. So where am I going to get the money from the taxpayers to support you know? Yeah. So there's some sense in it. He says, if we're protecting you, come on, he's not asking for free trade, he's asking for fair trade.
Fair trade.
There should be a balance. And it's very important. Where there's an imbalance in trade is wrong. And I'll talk about that if I have the time. Look at Canada. American farmers and dairy producers cannot export anything to Canada. Right? Because the tariffs are high and there's a lot of stringent barriers. But they can sell anything, including steel, to the United States. It doesn't work that way. Or look at his migration policy. The border, America has two land borders, Canada and Mexico, and the Atlantic and the Pacific.
Yeah.
The Mexican border, people just walk across. Won't you just walk across and disappear because it's a desert, you know, and all that. People just get into it. You can't allow that. And that was happening. People come as far as Nicaragua, walk across Mexico and go in. So you might not like his language and all that, but hey, the man says, I'm president of the United States, I'm not president of the world. So there's some sense, his style is not my style, but there's a method to the madness. So I respect that. Your critical comment about Nigeria, about Africa, what he said. Well, he's denied it. He said he didn't say it. So it's you say, I say. You know, so he denied it.
Do you think the United States should have done more in helping us with Boko Haram?
Well, heaven helps those who help themselves. Let's help ourselves first, right? Then we can ask them to help us. I have engaged with folks in the consular section of the embassy and all that. They tried to, but they didn't find willing partners. The equipments the Boko Haram people use are Nigerian Army equipment, right? They give you intelligence. And before you know it, the Boko Haram people get it. So they were frustrated. So right now, between US, France, Britain, and Germany, there are 10,000 troops from Mali to Niger to Chad and Cameroon just there to contain Boko Haram. Because we've got to help ourselves. So we need help, but we need to also help ourselves. We need to be ready for it. Have I exhausted you?
No. We're actually, it's good to really just discuss and really think critically about, I was thinking about the Trump thing, and how you said he might be very brash, but like things he's done, and it just came to my mind.
I mean, look at the economy.
He's met with Kim Jong-un, like, a lot of presidents have tried to have that relationship.
But he was brutish. He really came hard on sanctions, right? I made the man know that, look, where you Chris reach, I go match you and I'll beat you at it, and the man said, okay, let's talk. So we may not like the method, but it's working.
There's a method
now
to the
NATO countries are upping their expenditure on defense, right? Now he's engaging the Chinese. Look, you can't keep on putting barriers on trade. And guess what? America has an advantage, right? Because America imports a lot from China. China doesn't import as much. So he can put those barriers. At the end of the day, China needs America more than America needs China. So you'll find that, yes, they'll argue, go back and forth, but they'll sit down and agree on something. And he's doing the same thing with Europe. Europe is particularly painful for him because he's literally paying for their defense, but they're not giving him access to the markets. So you may not like his style, but
He's president.
that's his style. Everyone has his style. I mean, Obama's style was swagger, but it wasn't delivering.
Yeah, you came into Cross River State, young, fresh, with ideas.
I'm still fresh.
Yeah. Do you think largely that's what has caused our we not progressing as a country because of people who've been handling our affairs?
Why, age?
Age, the ideology, the ideas.
It's not age. Look, it's not the age. It's the age of the ideas. If you're not prepared for office, whether you're young or old, you'll misbehave. You won't get it right. So it's not that age. I mean, no. You just have to prepare for office. It's not something you go in there and want to do. You have to sit down and think through sector by sector. Have a clarity on the issues and be determined that I'll have to make it work. I've watched Donald Trump over the past almost 2 years now. There's a certain determination to get his way. If he was a fluke, by now he'll be tired. But there's a certain determination. I mean, I just before coming here, I was watching his interview with the Prime Minister of the UK. And I mean, a lot of the things he said about her government and this is not diplomatic. But he said it. I've said it. This is what I believe in. I think the world is coming used. Okay, this is your style. Take it and all that. But it makes a lot of sense. He said to her, for instance, if you go the way you're going, you'll not be able to have a free trade arrangement with the US because the EU will not allow you. Right? So you've got to determine which market you prefer, EU or US. And the US is a larger market. So there's, his style may be different.
Yeah, from your experience with the Budu Ranch International Mountain Race, that's generally the problem we have with sports also in Nigeria, where we can't bring in, people to engage in anything that's, even the football, we don't even bring in anybody here to do it. We don't have the infrastructures, grassroots is totally dead. And so from your experience with, what you started in 2005, yes, how, on a general level, in federal level, like as a country, what do we need to do more, in sports development? Planning.
What do you want to make out of it? Do you want to be champions or you just want to be participants? Right? The Obudu Mountain Race was actually born of tourism. We wanted to create a race that would attract attention to the ranch and show it. And it was shown on DSTV and Super Sports and all that. And so you see the cable car, you see the mountains, and it was a way of selling it. And it grew to become the richest mountain race in the world. The star prize was $50,000. The next prize to that, anywhere in the world, was $20,000. So every mountain runner wanted to be on that circuit. So it was busy and was good. Again, continuity is stopped now. But we need to ask ourselves, what is all this about? You know that every 4 years you have Olympics. You know that every 4 years you have a World Cup. Look, I'll use a personal example. My second daughter, she was an athlete. At the age of 14, the British High Commissioner came to visit me in Calabar. This was 2006. And asked me, I was quite friendly with him. And he said to me, Governor, are you aware that your daughter took part in a Prince of Wales or Prince of Edinburgh competition? Apparently, it's an age group thing. And she came first in 100 and 200 meters. In other words, at the age of 14, she was the fastest 200 and 100 meter runner in the entire UK. I said, I know she took part in the competition, but I didn't go into the details of it. He said, you're a very poor father. So, well, we know we were friends. But what was his mission? He said to me, I'm here on Her Majesty's mission. They were schooling in England. We want to retain her to prepare her for the Olympics.
What?
The Olympics was taking place 2012.
2012,
6 years ahead, they were recruiting and training because at the age of 20, she was 14. At the age of 20, the athlete peaks. That's your peak age at 20. Right? So they train you for that 6 years. They first get the best. 6 years prior, right, and train you preparing for Olympics. That's a serious country. They knew they were hosting the Olympics. They knew they had to do well in the Olympics. You can't host and be getting come number 30. You know?
See why you can't host in Nigeria.
You know, so they recruited. So I said to him, I said, but she wasn't born in the UK. He said, don't worry about that.
Sorry,
I said, okay, if you give her passport, you'll give me to say, no, I won't give it. But my wife jettisoned that because she thought it would affect her physique and all that, you know. But it's a thought behind it. You know you're having this. They weren't planning for the 2008 Olympics. They were planning for the 2012. So they were going to train her, put her on a special diet. They even got her admitted into Loughborough University, which is a sports university, right? Just hoping that, you know, so they can monitor her and all that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a failure. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Still the long-term planning we talked about.
What did you think about the Super Eagles' performance at the World Cup?
Or the lack of it.
Steve would argue. Steve would argue.
Steve is not one supporter of the Super Eagles.
Look, we all know we can do better than we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, a Brazilian sports commentator said once, and it's true, he said, the problem with Nigeria is our inconsistency. Sometimes we do very well and there's a lot of hope.
Yeah.
Then the next time we just floor, you know. So we're a large country, 200 million people. Football is by far the largest sport in Nigeria. You can have 20, 30, 40 Super Eagles teams in this country if you do the training. China has over 100 sports colleges. China wants to be, in the next 8 or 10 years, #1 in soccer in the world. Look at Croatia, it's a small country.
4 million.
They can win the World Cup. Okay? You've got to plan for it. Nothing just happens by happenstance. You have to work and plan for it. Work. But we don't. You know, so last minute we just got to go. All those players who are playing abroad, come. Then we add a few. You know, it doesn't work like that. Because even to sync, you know. And yes, you can have players abroad, but you must have several. And you know, it must be so competitive. Yeah. And Nigerian players abroad have an attitude. Oh, but it's almost automatic. We'll come in because we play for Chelsea. No. You've got to earn your stripes.
There's a general mistrust again, you know, for the political class.
Understandably.
Yeah.
And justifiably too.
Yeah. You know, from young people. How do you, dispel that notion?
You've got to earn their trust.
Yeah.
I like using my example. When I got in as governor, first of all, I was young, so they were suspicious, this young Lagos boy, you know, and all that. Then I was talking of sanitation, cleaning the place, and the people thought, like, look, that's not our problem. We want food on our table, not what's all this planting grass and all these things. Then you talk of tourism. What is tourism, you know? But gradually, I earned their trust. Trust is not an award. You earn it. Even your child. You can have 4 or 5 children. Each one has to earn your trust, right? It's not just award you because you're a governor. No. Governor, at best, you'll get respect. Doesn't mean I trust you. That is you earn. So the politicians have to earn the trust of the electorate and the governed. Sadly, there's nowhere in the world that politicians have achieved that. There's always a cynicism against politicians. It's just the degree. In Nigeria, it's very, very high. Yeah. But because we're all human, but you've got to earn it.
All right, are you guys done? I have the last question.
Yeah. No, Steve, you have something.
Steve hasn't drilled me enough.
The festivals, the Calabar festivals, and everything like that. Like you as a person, you know, your governance, your style, it reflects, it comes from you. You know, we see that you're liberal. How do you relax? You like music, you know, apparently you play the saxophone. How did this start for you?
Fela taught me how to play the sax.
Who?
Yeah. I know you weren't expecting that.
No.
I was pretty friendly with him.
Wow.
And he liked me. I think he liked me more for my name. He thought my name was so foreign, Donald Duke. Always trying to get me to change my name. They call me
so how did you meet him?
Shrine.
Oh,
I was social secretary in Zaria in ABU, and so we wanted him to. But before then, I used to go to the shrine a lot. His paymaster was a family friend, and so I'll go to shrine. Of course, I wouldn't pay. I'd take my friends and his paymaster then, Roy Smith, you know, would just clear the gates and I'll pass him. He said, Aburo me, let him go, you know. Then I got to meet Fela and we just got on, you know. And I could go to his house at Mashalashi and we just gist and talk. And prior to that, I used to play the piano as a kid and I played the guitar in secondary school, so I was already musically inclined. But there was a certain cool to the sax.
Yeah.
So I said to him, I don't know how it came about, but I wanted a sax. And he said to me, if you want to play the sax, you have to own one because you don't share it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I bought myself a saxophone and I started learning and all that. So he inspired it. I never practiced with him, but he inspired that.
Interesting.
Then we got really close. Once I invited him, I told him that the crowning to my being social secretary is if he comes to play in Zaria.
Interesting.
You know, he said, okay, he'll do that for me. But where the money? He was quite a character. We didn't have the money. So he said, okay, he'll give a lecture instead. And I said, lecture. He said, yes, I'll give you a lecture. A lecture or nothing. If you don't pay me money, I no come. So I said, okay, lecture. And it was such a brilliant idea.
This was 80.
This was 81.
Ooh.
1980.
Peak of his.
Yeah, 1980. So he flew into Zaria, into Kaduna. He chartered a plane, flew into Kaduna. I received him at the airport. We had a Costa bus, took him to Zaria. He arrived at about 1. The lecture started about 4 p.m. He spoke for 5 hours non-stop and held everybody spellbound. You know, he fancied himself as an intellectual.
Yeah.
He talked about everything. His relationship with his wives. I want to use the language he would use and all that. There's nothing he didn't talk about. He talked about Festac. He talked about Benwu. I mean, he knows his brief, you know. And it was better than having a show. I mean, professors were there. The hall was full. For 5 hours, everybody was like that.
Just watching Fela.
You know, and it was simply amazing. And to me, that was a crowning event as, you know, my 1 year as social secretary. And quite a remarkable person. Quite conflicted too. Because, you know, people like that, they don't usually practice what they preach.
Yeah.
He was very dictatorial. He managed his establishment like a boot camp, you know, but he was brilliant. I mean, once I was watching him on the shrine and the music was playing, he had incredible ears. Everything was okay, but he detected a tune off. So the guy is playing the guitar, he goes there and he starts to tune the guy's guitar as he's playing. Then when he gets it right, he gives this guy a bad slap. Wham! You know? And the guys, you know, but you know, so his ears he was brilliant. You go to the shrine, it starts about 12:31 a.m., right? And he's playing, and 5 hours will go. You think it's maybe 1 or 2 hours, then you hear CCP, custom checkpoint. You look up, it's daybreak.
Wow.
And you think you've only spent an hour and a half. You're totally mesmerized. Then he'll tell you short break. Short break is over.
How was your relationship with him when you started working like with the government?
No, he passed before. He passed in 98.
Yeah, he passed in
98.
Yeah.
Okay. But you know, and again, this is subjective. I think after a while,
he got
his music,
Yeah.
you know, now this is subjective. I remember once telling him that for me, his best composition was Palava, right? And that double album where you had Palava and Rafa Fight, you know? He looked at me and said, you don't know anything. He believed that each one was better than the other one, you know, and all that. And of course, there's Water No Enemy and all that. But when he now introduced what he called the second bass guitar, right? And you see that in Teach Me Nonsense and all that. For me, well, it was more intellectual music at that point because to have two bass guitars playing simultaneously is deep.
Yeah.
But in terms of commercial value, I think it was going down. But again, like I said, it's subjective. The point is the the man introduced an entirely new
Sound.
genre
Sound.
of music. And it's being studied today in universities across the world.
Yeah.
He was absolutely brilliant.
Amazing.
What other things?
But it was very self-destructive too.
Yeah.
What other things do you listen to? Music.
Music?
Yeah.
I'm varied, right? I don't understand current Nigerian music because they all sound the same. And,
Shaku shaku.
you know, Western music, old school, I like that because I grew up in that age.
80s,
you know,
70s.
80s, 70s and all that. Bob Marley was phenomenal. Let me tell you a story between Fela and Bob Marley. You see, a friend and I, Ogune Yaoki, he's late now, went to see Fela. Ogune Yaoki was as close to Bob Marley as I was as close to Fela. So in the course of discussion, by this time, Bob Marley had died.
Okay.
So Ogune told Fela that at his death, he was worth 200 million. Fela kept quiet for about 5 minutes. He didn't say a word. Afterwards, he said, he must die. He was talking to himself. He said, why no go die? He must die. Baba, why now? He said, the motherfucker. He said, we had a concert to do. Himself, Bob Marley, and Stevie Wonder were going to go on a world tour.
What?
And on that tour, Fela said he was going to make $1 million. That you see, when he was disturbing Nigeria, Kalakuta and all that, his value was $1 million. Right? He said on that tour, he was going to make $1 million, and that would have been okay for him. But they couldn't do the tour because, according to him, the motherfucker was sick. Okay? Then eventually the motherfucker died. He kept quiet. He said he must die. So he was something else. He was absolutely stunning, and on stage he was magnetic. And you know, we know him for this, but he was a classical artist. If he at Awolo Road, Jazz 38, with Tunde Kuboye and all that. You were talking about TF Kuboye.
Yeah.
That's named after
him, yeah.
after Tunde Kuboye. Tunde was married to his niece.
Yes.
She's late now. And so I think it was Thursday or so, they would have just pure jazz. No high life, no Afrobeat. And he was playing. And he was amazing. So, you know, he knew he was skilled. He went to school.
And the message in his music.
That's, you see, there's a difference between art and craft. A lot of the music we play in Nigeria is the work of craftsmen. They're hustling, they just start making it. When it's art is inspired. Craft is intellectual. Craft is where you think, look, I changed this thing to sound like this. But art comes out of you. If you watch a film called Amadeus, it's about Mozart. When he wrote, he heard the music and it was as if he was taking a dictation. No cancellation, nothing. So in the film, Salieri, who was a brilliant artist but was amazed at Mozart, he saw his script. Original, no cancellation, you know? So you know that it comes from deep within. Fela's worked well like that. That's why till today, craft doesn't last longer. Art will last because it's inspired. It will last all long. Bob Marley is inspired. So you'll still listen to Bob Marley music. But craft music don't last long. They just fade away. And it's like a painting. The intellectual painters, and if you go to the Vatican, I went to the Vatican and honestly, my head was like this and I had neck pain. You see the works of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, jeez. And they'll tell you that what they show is just a small percentage of what the Vatican has money. What they have on them. But you can see inspired works, So there's craft, but art is purely inspired. And Fela was an inspired artist. There's this day we went to the shrine and it was a Friday night and he had just been raided by the army. At that time, shrine was at Moshalashi and across was Abalti barracks. And they were always having conflicts. The soldiers would come, maybe want to rape one of the women or harass one of his people on the roadside. Then they will run into the place and, conflict. So on this day we got there. They had thrown tear gas all over the place into the shrine. We had to disperse. Then we came back. His mother was alive then. So the show that ought to have started about midnight started about 2:30 a.m. And he was angry that we didn't stand up to the folks. And I didn't mean stand up. My father doesn't know where I am. Standing up, you know. As he was talking and chastising that we have to stand up for our rights and everything, he just stopped. Then he said, I have a song in my head. I know that the name of the song is titled Suffering and Smiling.
Wow.
He said, but the band doesn't know the song. In 1 month I'll play it. 2 weeks later, I went to his home and they were rehearsing it. And he was actually singing about the event, you know.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
That's deep.
He was
deep.
Crazy, man.
And you know, you'll see his mother there. She was in her late 70s.
Mm.
She also was glued at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning
Listen.
watching her son, you know, and all that.
Wow. All right, so last question ties back to my first question, which is, you know, which ties essentially to the backbone of what I predict, you know, this presidential race would be, riding on the back of young people, canvassing young people to come out to vote. What's the message you have to people, young people broken down into young people who have their PVCs, who won't come out to vote, those who don't have their PVCs yet?
Young people have to learn that they are the next, they have to take charge, right? They have to take charge of society. They can't abdicate it. Sooner or later, it will fall on their lap. And the sooner they get involved, not necessarily running for elections, but even determining those who govern them, the better for them. And they can't sell themselves short, give you rice, give you this and all that. That's nonsense, right? You need to engage your representatives, whether it's a councillor, or chairman, or governor, what is in it. And then when he speaks, you understand, you know whether he understands what he's talking about. So if they don't take charge today, they will suffer tomorrow. So it's to their benefit that they get involved and take charge. I see it happening though. It happened to some extent in 15, okay? What we're advocating for is even more of that. And when you look at the voters' registration, it's spiked, particularly in the South. It just spiked. It's not where we would want it. A lot more have now gotten. I was talking to a church leader, and I said to him, a staff of mine in Calabar went to church, and they wouldn't let him into church until he showed his PVC. He said yes, that he had asked them to, all this pray, that is, you work and you pray. You can't just come here and be praying and hope that, you know, we have to get involved. But I see a lot of organizations, churches, civil society, and all that. So you said something. It's not just getting the PVC, but on that day will they come out and use it?
Yeah.
I hope we would sensitize them enough. Again, if they find an inspiring candidate, they may want to come out. If they don't, they just sit back and say. I mean, I've also been in that dilemma. Right, in 2011, the folks who were running didn't inspire me. I didn't go out to vote. But it's wrong. Yeah. You have to. You know, you have to vote.
What do you have to say about the notion that, you know, getting the PVC is easier in the north than it is here because they're trying to frustrate us?
I don't think it's a deliberate policy, and I hope not, right? But you see, in urban areas, you're working, you can't go and queue for too long. These guys are in rural areas, they have no job, so they can just sit down under a tree until it's their turn and they register, right? I don't think it's a deliberate policy. I've engaged INEC on this actually, and they said, ideally, every polling unit should be a registration center. And that will require having about 4,000 or 5,000, but the budget is not there. So they said, okay, every political ward, the budget is not there. So they had to reduce it to every local government. And that makes the queues very long, right? And it could take you days. If they had it in every polling unit, it's 500 people, right? Over a week, you register everybody. So we need to, well, that means we're not investing in our democracy too. Again, you know you're having elections in 4 years' time. You don't wait to a year before. It's part of the planlessness of our society.
Yeah. Last question.
I've heard that before.
These guys called SARS, they're killing us.
Yeah, man. SARS
really
is heavy on the
We don't know
streets.
what we've done to them. we don't fit into their conventional kind of like, work. They see you with a laptop, immediately you're in.
Yahoo
They're extorting.
Yeah.
It's corruption, right? They extort people, and I've talked about corruption of need. You have this policeman who cannot fend for his family, so he takes and he's trying to extort. It's pure extortion. But the noise has been so loud on it, I'm shocked that there's no reaction from the authorities. Because what are they actually doing? Who are the commanders involved? Lack of consequences.
That's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Donald Duke. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and, just taking us down this journey. We're looking forward to what you're going to do, the town hall meetings, and, the grassroots mobilization. We're also looking forward to, the speeches. We hope there will be debates with the other presidential candidates as well.
There should be.
We all know they're not coming.
we hope to see more of that. But, thank you again for coming on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. All right, guys. It's Loose Talk Podcast. Thank you.